Okay, so this is the point where we're going to start reading. We're not going to take a lot of notes on this page, but this is really going to help you understand what Stace does next, which is going to lead us to the concepts and definitions and ideas that you will be using when you do the next portion of your writing for this week. So let's go ahead and look at this together. We're going to read this together. So if you've been stopping and reading the paragraph before I lecture on it, at this point we're going to read together. So he's saying that so next in this paragraph G, he's saying he is going to be giving us some examples of how people in ordinary conversation might use the word free will. So let's look at Jones. I once went without food for a week. So he's talking about an event. Smith says, did you do that of your own free will? Jones says, no, I did it because I was lost in the desert and could find no food. All right, so this is an event, and then when he thinks back to it, when he thinks about what led to this event, Jones says the cause was I was lost in the desert and could find no food, and he gives the cause because he's answering the question, did you do something of your own free will? So he doesn't just say, no, I didn't do it of my own free will. He gives a reason for the conclusion that he did not do it of his own free will, and the reason is a cause. And notice that the cause is about a condition over which he has no control. Now, whether or not he's in the desert, he might have control over, but because he is in the desert, something that he doesn't have control over, if he doesn't have food on his person, is that in the desert, you're not going to find food, especially if you're in the middle of a bunch of sand or whatnot. So under certain conditions at least. All right, so let's go to another example. And so he says, Gandhi, I once fasted for a week. Did you do that of your own free will? Yes. Okay, so Gandhi's conclusion or position is that yes, he did do something of his own free will. He fasted of his own free will. Again, what is the reason that Gandhi's not going to give? I wanted to compel the British government to give India its independence. So he's talking about a want that he has. A want for what? This event. So there's the event of fasting for a week, and he ties it to this cause of a want, a goal that he had, a desire that he had. And because he's tying this to a want in terms of a goal or a desire, he's saying that's the reason why I am concluding that I did do the fasting of my own free will. Now notice how I'm talking through this. This is very important because you're going to talk through your own causal history like this, but not exactly like this. So you'll find out more soon. But again, listen to how I'm talking through this. This is part of the instruction. Really listening to me as a role model and how I work through this is going to help you. All right, so another example. Judge, did you steal the bread of your own free will? Yes. Conclusion is, I did steal it of my own free will. What's the reason? So stealing the bread was some event, supposedly, right? This is a question, but the question shows that this event happened for Stace. What did he do in this imaginary example? He stole bread. And so in claiming that he did it of his own free will, he supports that by pointing to the what? The cause. He's saying, I was hungry. All right, and you may not fully understand what the linkage is between pointing to a cause and an event and claiming whether or not it's free, but we will. Remember, right now, all Stace is trying to do is show us how people might use the word free will in ordinary conversation, right, in common usage. And again, why is he doing that? Because he thinks that the way to determine the correct definition for free will is through common usage. So he's trying to give us some examples through dialogue. Okay. Did you steal, or in different circumstances, the conversation might run, did you steal of your own free will? So again, there's this idea that somebody stole, right? There's an event, so maybe example 4, which is a version of example 3. No. Okay, so here he says he did steal of his own free will, and he gives the cause as to why. But here he also gives a cause, and yet he concludes that he did not steal of his own free will, right? What does he say? My employer threatened to beat me if I did not. Now, one thing I don't want you to get from what we've gone over here is that simply pointing to a cause in and of itself does not show whether your action is free or not. That's not what the point is that I want you to get. And actually, it's not the point that Stace wants you to get, okay? And we'll see that. But notice that whenever a person in a dialogue is talking about or trying to support the conclusion that they acted freely or not, they do find it necessary to point to a cause, which is interesting, okay? So that's the main thing that I want you to see here at this point. And what is the main thing that Stace wants you to see here at this point? Okay, so now let's go to page 5. Notice that it's only 5 minutes, so I'm really trying to help you understand the most important things on each page. Okay, so now we're going to read through some more examples together. Again, listen to how I'm talking. Listen to how I'm using words. I'm your role model, your mentor, your guide, your coach. It's like, let me give you a quick analogy. If I knew a technique for kicking a soccer ball really well or throwing a basketball from a certain point on the court, I might show you how to do that, and then you would try to mimic me. Or I might show you someone doing it in an excellent way. Therefore, you might try to mimic me. So that's what I'm doing right now, guys. This is the court, understanding philosophical texts and ideas. And as I talk out loud about it, I'm trying to show you how to talk out loud and therefore how to write about the kinds of things that we're interested in this week. So don't take this passively. Think of the way that I'm talking and working through this text as that of a coach showing you how. Okay, so example 5. Did you go out of your own free will? So we know the event was what? Going out, right? Going out, there it is right there. So there's some event, Jones went out. Jones concludes or is of the mind, his position is that he did go out of his own free will. Again, he gives a reason. The reason is a cause. He went to get his lunch. So here's the cause of an event. He brings up the cause in trying to defend the claim that he did something of his own free will, that he, went out. Did you leave your office of your own free will? So here's a variation of example 5. So in both cases, this one you go out, this one they're going out, this one they're going out in a particular context, but it's still going out, right? So here's an event where somebody went out, left. I guess you could say both of these we could say are exiting spaces. But at this time, he says he did not go out or leave somewhere of his own free will. Notice that he still refers to a cause for this instance of going out or leaving a place, just as he did in example 5. In both cases, Jones does that. And yet here, he's saying he did not do it of his own free will. All right? So we're going to get into this example a little bit more. At a recent murder trial in Trenton, some of the accused had signed confessions, but afterwards asserted that they had done so under police duress. The following exchange might have occurred. Judge, did you sign this confession of your own free will? No, I signed it because the police beat me up. So the event is signing a confession, right? And then he concludes or is of the mind that he did not do this of his own free will. And then again, a reason in the form of a cause, the police beat me up. So one thing that I want you to be thinking about is look at the paragraphs that you wrote for your causal history of what led you to take Philosophy 1301 as an online class. How could you break down your causal chain in terms of causes and events? So, for example, I could say I applied for a job and that caused me to get an interview. So the event was applying for a job, causing me to get an interview. So then I can ask, did I apply for the job? Did I get an interview? Was my getting an interview of my own free will? I might say yes, I might say no. But the point is, how can you break down your causal chain in terms of causes and events? Just keep in mind that when you say A is the cause of B, of course, B might be an event, but then that event itself can also become a cause. So I might say, well, applying for a job was the cause of me being interviewed. That's the event. So then I can talk about whether or not my getting an interview is a manifestation of my own free will. But then I can then look at the next causal link. Why did I practice a teaching demonstration? Well, because the cause of that was what? That I got an interview for a job. So at first I talked about the cause of, I talked about getting an interview as an event caused by applying for the job. But then in the next segment of my causal chain, I can talk about, I did practice my teaching demonstration. That's an event. Well, what caused that? Well, the fact that I was called for an interview. Okay, but we'll talk more about that later. I'm just giving you a heads up, trying to show you how what's going on here might coincide with something you've already done and will do. Okay, so now suppose that a philosopher had been a member of the jury. We could imagine this conversation taking place in the jury room. Foreman of the jury. The prisoner says that he signed the confession because he was beaten, not of his own free will. Philosopher. This is quite irrelevant to the case. There is no such thing as free will. Foreman. Do you mean to say that it makes no difference whether he signed because his conscience made him want to tell the truth or because he was beaten? So notice that the foreman is asking about, the importance of different causes, because the philosopher says it doesn't matter whether or not he did it of his own free will, and the foreman's wondering whether or not thinking about the causes that led somebody to do something aren't important. But the philosopher says none at all. Whether he was caused, I'm going to bracket this just so you can see this, whether he was caused to sign by beating or by some desire of his own, desire to tell the truth, for example, in either case, his signing was determined. So that is premise one. In other words, he wanted to tell the truth, that's a cause. He didn't want to be beaten, that's a cause. Being beaten, of course, is what we might call an external cause. Conscience and wanting to tell the truth might be considered an internal cause. In any case, signing the confession is still cause. That's what the philosopher is saying. He's saying metaphysical determinism is at play. And therefore, in either case, statement 2, did he act of his own free will? In other words, since metaphysical determinism would still be true, since something still would have caused that person to sign the confession, we can conclude that they did not, we can say that neither cause, in any case where one cause led him to sign the confession or the other, he still wouldn't be acting of his free will. Then we have another statement here. Since there is no such thing as free will, the question, that's statement 4, whether he signed of his own free will ought not to be discussed by us. So here's another premise and then the final conclusion. So basically he's been defending the claim that we really shouldn't be discussing whether people sign stuff of their own free will because free will is not a reality, is basically what he's saying. And so he's argued for this in answering the question of the foreman. Now, Stace says that most of us would say that it seems like this shows that there are absurd consequences for how a philosopher is using free will. And I mean, really, guys, think about that. Think about the court, the court system, the criminal justice. Doesn't it presuppose free will and that we can be held responsible for our actions and that we can make decisions and be responsible for our actions based on what's legal, illegal, as well as moral, immoral? If there is no such thing as free will, then the whole criminal system, the legal system, law enforcement seems kind of weird and odd and meaningless, right? And think about the concept of justice itself. What does it mean to carry out justice, to seek justice? It's to hold people accountable for their actions, right? Well, how can we hold people accountable for their actions if they couldn't have done otherwise, if they lacked the freedom, right, to do as they did? So there are important, bigger, wider ramifications, and even though we're not focused on the case of George Floyd and the aftermath, what we're talking about here certainly could be used to think about the case of George Floyd. Did Derek Chauvin, was his use of a knee to restrain George Floyd, was that a manifestation, an act of free will? Was he acting freely when he did that? Did George Floyd himself act freely? Was his death a result of his free will? What if you're a hard determinist? No, neither one of them reflected free will. But that's just me showing you that you can apply this stuff and that it has relevance to other things. And that's what we're doing in my ethics class, by the way, George Floyd and the killing of George Floyd and the aftermath. Okay, so look, we're already on page 6. The foreman and the rest of the jury would rightly conclude that the philosopher must be making some kind of mistake. What kind of mistake could it be? There is only one possible answer. So at this point, you might want to underline what I have underlined here. The philosopher must be using the phrase free will in some peculiar, odd way of his own, which is not the way in which men usually, common usage, ordinary conversation, when they wish to determine a question of moral responsibility. That is, he must be using an incorrect definition of it as implying action not determined by causes. Again, what we're talking about is that something is made to happen by causes. So when you see this word at this point, be thinking made to happen. When he's using determine here, he's not talking about hard determinism or self-determinism. He's talking about I'm just reminding you guys of this, the thesis of universal causation, that everything has a cause. Okay, now here's the note that you might want to add. Philosopher is not using free will as it is commonly used. Philosopher is using an incorrect definition for free will. Okay, see how we're doing on time here. Okay, I'm really learning to cut down my lectures or not. I used to spend hours on this, and now I'm hoping to keep everything in about an hour and 15 minutes versus 2 or 3 hours. All right, okay, so let's go ahead. I think I'm going to stop this video here, okay? And we're going to pick up with the next few pages in a separate video.